Hey everybody, welcome back to Bloodborne. This is part 12, and we're going to start off in the Forbidden Woods area right after defeating the Shadows of Yharnam, and we're going to head into Byrgenwerth. So, this is the area that we were talking to Alfred about a lot earlier in the game. It's theorized that in the lore, this is built on top of the entrance to the old Thumerian ruins, which I've said in a previous episode are the Chalice dungeons that we go into. Byrgenwerth was definitely the first place that was able to discover something in those ruins, and Alfred calls it a holy medium. And while it's not necessarily expanded on what that holy medium actually was, it led to the scholars of the school believing that they finally found evidence of the gods, basically, the Great Ones. This led to the discovery of blood healing, using blood that I believe was found actually in the tomb. So that very well could be the holy medium that Alfred was referring to. Forgive my speculation on whether or not that's the case, because I did do some reading before recording the voiceover for this episode, just so that I didn't give any wrong information, because Byrgenwerth is a very important part of the story here. This is where everything starts, basically. Master Willem and Lawrence, what Willem called a betrayal, happened here. Mikolash was a member, from what I read, and we will meet him later on in the story. Carol was also a member of the school, and they were all scholars here. They were the ones who basically set everything in this game into motion. Now, we don't ever actually meet Carol, so we don't really know much about Carol at all, except for they could basically listen to the Great Ones and sort of transcribe what the Great Ones were trying to say. And that's what the Carol runes actually are. They are the human representation of utterings and scratches and noises of the Great Ones. So what all of this means is, after they discovered the Holy Medium in the Chalice Dungeon, what they did was they began searching for ways to ascend, to become the Great Ones themselves, or to at least reach a higher plane of existence, which led to all of the scholars kind of going off and doing their own thing. Willem, of course, he stayed with Byrgenwerth, and what he wanted to do was figure out a way to line the inside of his skull, or line his brain with eyes, because he believed that the more eyes you have, the more insight you would have, and the higher you would evolve. Lawrence, of course, saw the things that the blood was doing, and he believed that the blood was the way to ascend and become like the Great Ones. I'm not exactly sure if Carol had any kind of thoughts on how to ascend or anything like that. As I said before, not a whole lot of information is really given on them in the game. Mikolash, of course, we will meet later on, and I'll talk about Mikolash a lot more later, because I don't really recall too much information about him off the top of my head. And being he is a very important part to the story as well, I also do not want to give any wrong information on him. So I think it's best for me to do a little bit more research on that and wait so that I'm not doing pure speculation. I haven't talked much about the enemies in this area. As you can see, we have these little fly things, and I honestly think that they are students of the school here who may have become those. I'm not 100% sure, but it's interesting to think that they have all those eyes that are kind of like on their heads, and with Willem believing that the more eyes you have, the higher you could ascend, it kind of makes sense that they would be part of this school and maybe became beasts or whatever those things are because of it. I wish I could remember the name of this enemy, but if you recall in an earlier episode, we did see these down in the Chalice Dungeon. So, with this being the only one in the main game, and this being in Bergenworth, my assumption is they basically captured it down there and brought it up here to study it. Possibly thinking that it was one of the great ones, or that it had some sort of power that they could use and harness to ascend. But yeah, Bergenworth is a really, really interesting place. It's a smaller area, so that's why the episode is only about 25 minutes as opposed to the usual length of 30 or so. So there's not a whole lot to it, but there's a whole lot that can actually be gained from kind of looking around at the environment and all that sort of stuff. There is a little shortcut that you can open up right here that will let you get into the school if you do happen to die in here. And it is very easy to die in here because in just a moment we'll actually be fighting I'm assuming a student that's kind of guarding the area here. That Pearl Slug is a Chalice Dungeon material, which we'll use to get into later layers of the Chalice Dungeon. And as we entered that door over there, to the right there was a hatch. And a lot of people think that that hatch is the way that they initially got into the Chalice Dungeons. And that's why they built this school over top of it, so that they could do that. Now this fight is extremely tough. I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but I do know that they have increased stats, way increased from what level you would normally be at the game. I only did 360 damage to her through a visceral attack, so she is very powerful. And if you actually look around, in those jars over to the left, and a few other places in this area, they're actually filled with eyes. So they were collecting eyes. I don't know how they thought they were going to line their brains with them. I'm assuming they would eat them, or do something like that. And maybe that's what caused the students outside to turn into those bug-looking things. And I kept trying and trying, but I failed to parry her. She's very tough. She's very fast. And a little while ago, you saw her use a spell, which is a Call Beyond. One hit from that typically will kill you. It's a very, very powerful spell. And right here, I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with her. But it actually ended up just showing how useless and crappy some of the NPCs in this game are. So yeah, that's why a lot of the summons in this game are not very good. But we need to come up here so that we can get through that main door that we passed by, where we summoned that NPC at. This is where the key to actually get through that door is kept. And I think we already picked that up. But if you come up here, you can get the empty phantasm shell. And what that is, that will add arcane damage to your weapon. We'll use that a few times in the playthrough here. Personally, I've found my weapons to be a whole lot more useful if I just build them kind of regularly and then add stuff like the fire paper, the bolt paper, and the empty phantasm shell, which is why I haven't gone full arcane build on the actual weapon itself. Later on in the playthrough, I do actually end up adding fire back to the weapon, because I end up finding fire gems that are actually worth adding to it. And as you can see there, I did not get hit by the whole Alcalbion, but getting hit by one of those things took about 30% of my health off. And I ended up just swiping at her like a crazy person to finish that fight once and for all. So we're not going to go fight Rom yet. But we're going to open this door. We're going to come talk to Willem. Everybody say hi to Master Willem. And say goodbye to Master Willem. Now we got the Carol Rune Eye from him, and what that does is that puts up your item discovery, so that we can potentially get more items. I think it's interesting to note that when you kill him, he does not bleed red. He bleeds gray, which is the same thing that the celestial minions bleed, and pretty much every other kin bleeds. So, in my eyes, I think that means that he has ascended. He became a great one, basically. At least that's what it reads as to me. And if ascending to a great one means that you can basically be comatose and unable to speak and sit in a rocking chair looking over a lake, I don't think it's all that it's cracked up to be. So we're just going to put some more Carol runes on, get our setup for Rom here, because we are about to go fight Rom. And I was actually thinking of changing weapons and using Ludwig's Holy Blade to fight Rom, but I decided against it. I decided I was going to stick with the Saw Spear for as long as I can, at least. So you just come up here to the end of the balcony there and fall down, and you get transported to the Moonside Lake. And that's Rom. Doesn't she look pretty? So yeah, Rom has a lot of eyes. Spoiler warning, I do die. Rom is herself not a terrible boss fight, and she's pretty easy once you get rid of all these spiders. But I feel that this boss fight does kind of have the Dark Souls 2 syndrome of add more enemies to the fight and it'll make it harder. Now there are two ways you can go about this. You can just go for Rom herself and try to do as much damage as you can. But she likes to do that attack, which will push you away from her and pretty much kills you in one hit. So you can also go about this and defeat each spider individually, which is what I end up doing here. This is the time when I actually do defeat the boss. So I'm going to let this boss fight play out. You'll kind of get an idea of what I did, and I will return when the boss fight's over. So yeah, I hate that boss fight. It's far and away the worst boss fight in the game. But like I said, I feel like it has the Dark Souls 2 syndrome of just add a bunch of enemies and all of a sudden it becomes harder. But in an effort not to bitch about a boss fight anymore, I do like the lore implications that surround Rom. While not a whole lot is really answered in the game, a lot of the theories point to Rom being a successful experiment of the Bergenwar scholars through the experiments that they were doing on patients in the research hall. The research hall being an area in the DLC, which we will get to much later in the playthrough. As for what happens after you actually defeat Rom, you walk up to the Thumerian Queen, and you get transported to the cathedral that was spoken of when we talked to that person inside the house in the Forbidden Woods. Now, because we have the tonsil stone that was given to us, if we had stood there and let the amygdala pick us up, it would have transferred us somewhere else.
Very well.
But we will go there later on. This is actually going to be the end of the video. I just put some more points into strength because I am going to be using a heavier weapon later on in the game, and I wanted to start preparing for that. But this is going to do it. So thank you for watching. Hope you're enjoying it so far, and I will catch everybody next time. Thank you very much. Have a great day.